Good morning, friends. Today I want to take you back to the book of Isaiah, to chapter 49, verse 6, where Isaiah, at God's direction, is describing the great servant who will do God's bidding. And that servant is, of course, a reference to Jesus Christ himself. And so in Isaiah we read about Jesus saying, "It is too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth." And having read that, I can't help but think how amazing our God is, how consistent he is, how the same themes thread throughout the scriptures. Because here God is saying that it isn't enough that Jesus comes to the earth simply to save those who have been preserved, who have been kept and saved from national Israel. No, Jesus will not only preserve his people from among Israel, he will be a light to the nations that salvation may go out and the peoples of the earth might find that preservation as well. So even in Isaiah, even in this prophecy that took place roughly 700 years before the earthly advent of Christ, the idea of preservation and light are being used to describe what he is going to do. He's not just going to preserve certain people from Israel, he's going to preserve certain people from the very ends of the earth. That's the salt. And then, of course, the light isn't going to stay in Israel. He's going to be a light for the nation. That's the light, the nations. That's the lamp on its stand. And this shows not only that this same theme is consistent throughout redemptive history, but it highlights the fact that once again, the Lord is simply calling us to reflect who he is. He was the salt of the earth before he described us as the salt of the earth. He was the light of the world before he called us the light of the world. And so as we act in those roles now, we are walking in his footsteps. We are following the trail that he has already established. And I hope that can be an encouragement to us when we think about the fear or anxiety involved in sharing the gospel, or inviting someone to church, or simply expressing how thankful we are for God's salvation, or whatever else God is doing immediately in our lives. When you think about those circumstances, realize that you're not alone. And you haven't been set a task that Jesus wasn't himself willing to do first. Because that's important, right? We often think about good leaders being the kinds of people who will get right down and work alongside you, that they won't ask you to do something that they weren't willing to do themselves. Well, Jesus is just such a leader because he did it. Despite the fact that he's the Son of God, that he and the Father are one, that he is owed all the glory and majesty and honor of the entire universe, he was willing to sit and converse and eat with the lowest of the low, with even the outcasts of society. He was willing to touch the lepers. He was willing to indulge people, the presence of people that everybody else would just not be willing to do. And he did it so that he could share his own gospel with them. The fact that he was the bread of life. He was the door through which they must enter. He was the way, the truth, and the life. That he was the way to the Father, and there was no other way. And he took all the persecution that came as a result both of that message and his willingness to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, to be out there among the people, interacting with them, no matter who they were. He took persecution because of that. And no, he was not indulging in their sin, but he was loving the sinner enough to show them the way they could escape the wrath that is coming on account of that sin. Our Lord has done it. And in his power, with his Spirit within us, we can do it too. He was the salt of the earth and the light of the world first. So let us walk in the way he walked, trusting in him always, and so be faithful to his calling. Have a good and godly day, and I hope to see you soon.